Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Smooth Brain EDH. Today is the last episode of our Commander Legends series, where everyone picks a Commander Legends commander and builds a deck around it. We may have some familiar faces in today's episode, but it's a brand new game. Justin is running his Jared Carthalion deck again. It's a Blood Pod style deck with a lot of Monarchy synergy. Cameron's back with Belbe. His game plan is to drop as many big mana spells as he can. Logan's playing Dargo and Tormod again. This is a Rakdos mid-range deck. And Ethan is back with his life gain tokens deck with Ikra, Shidiqi, and Prava. Alright, we've got decks in order. Let's look at starting hands. Justin keeps his 7 of Temple Garden, Carthalion Forest, Throne Warden, 3 Visits, Birthing Pod, Court of Bounty, and Zealous Conscripts. Cameron keeps 3 Forests, Nurturing Peatland, Arbor Elf, Animist's Awakening, and Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger. Logan keeps 3 Swamps, Dragon Skull Summit, Chaos Warp, Beseech the Queen, and Ugin the Ineffable. And then Ethan keeps Snow-Covered Forest, Plains, Prismatic Vista, Fabled Passage, Barren Moor, Swords to Plowshares, and Lightning Greaves. Alright, we've seen the hands. Let's see how the game goes. Ethan wins the die roll and starts his turn off with a Forest into an Elvish Mystic. After Ethan passes, Logan plays a Swamp and then passes to Justin. Justin plays a tapped Temple Garden and passes to Cameron. Cameron, like Ethan, plays a Forest and an Elf, but this time an Arbor Elf, and then he passes to Ethan. Ethan starts his turn off with a Prismatic Vista and then taps for 2, casting a Nature's Lore. He puts a Murmuring Bosk onto the battlefield and passes to Logan. Logan plays another Swamp and passes. Justin plays Carthalion Forest, taps for 2, and casts 3 Visits. He finds a Savannah to the battlefield. He then moves to his end step and passes to Cameron. Cameron starts his turn off with a Nurturing Peatland and then taps for 2, casting Belbe, and takes 1. And with nothing else to do, he just passes to Ethan. On his turn, Ethan plays a Plains, and then taps for 1, casting Soul Ring, taps that for 2 to cast Lightning Greaves, and then taps for 3 to cast Prava, and also puts his Greaves on Prava. He then passes to Logan after that. Logan starts his turn off with Dragon Skull Summit, and then casts Beseech the Queen, paying 3 black instead of 6 colorless. He searches his library and reveals Necropotence, putting it to his hand. He passes. Unfortunately, Justin misses a land drop and is only able to cast Throne Warden. He then passes to Cameron. Cameron makes 3 mana by tapping his 2 lands and then untapping his Forest with Arbor Elf. He also loses 1 to Nurturing Peatland, and then casts Retreat to Hagra. He then plays a land, everyone loses a life and he gains 1. Cameron attempts to move to his post-combat main phase, but before he can, Ethan cracks his Prismatic Vista, finding a Plains, and then casts Swords to Plowshares, targeting Belbe. With nothing else to do after that, Cameron passes to Ethan. Ethan plays a Fabled Passage on his turn, and then decides to pass to Logan. Logan plays a tapped Canyon Slough, and then taps for 3, casting Necropotence. Logan pays 5 life and exiles 5 cards, and then moves to his end step, discarding and exiling 4 more cards. Justin plays a Reclamation Sage, destroying the Necropotence, and then passes to Cameron. And then on Cameron's upkeep, Justin casts Force of Vigor, exiling Court of Bounty, destroying Cameron's Retreat and Ethan's Boots. And then after that, Cameron plays a Windswept Heath for his land for turn, fetches for a Bayou, and then recasts Belbe. Cameron takes 1 to Nurturing Peatland, and then Ethan fetches with Fabled Passage on his end step, finding a Swamp. Still on Cameron's end step, Ethan taps for 8 and creates 2 1/1 tokens. Cameron then untaps a Forest with Arbor Elf and Nature's claims Ethan's Soul Ring. Ethan then gains 4, and we move to his turn. Ethan starts his turn off by playing a Forest. He taps for 5, casting Ikra, Shidiqi. Ethan then swings Prava at Logan and a Soldier token at Cameron. They both take it, and Ethan gains 9 off Ikra's ability. It's actually at this point I want to jump in and let you guys know that we messed up with the wording of Belbe. Belbe specifies that mana is only made if Cameron's opponents lose life, not if Cameron loses life. We didn't realize this at the time, for it's one of the first times we played Belbe, and so it'll happen the rest of the video. Sorry about that. And so, Ethan makes 4 colorless mana by mistake with Belbe, and casts Sermonic Revelation, drawing 5 cards. And after drawing all 5 of those cards, he passes to Logan. Logan plays a Smoldering Marsh on his turn, and then taps for 3, and casts Toxic Deluge. He pays 7 life to it, wiping the board. After that, he casts a Zulaport Cutthroat, and passes to Justin. Justin decides to cast Jared this turn, making Logan the Monarch. He then passes to Cameron after that. Cameron plays a Forest. He taps for 5, taking 1 to Peatland, and casts Animist Awakening X's 4. He reveals the top 4 cards of his library, finding a swamp to the battlefield taps, and then puts the rest on the bottom of his library. Cameron passes to Ethan, and Ethan starts his turn off with a snow-covered forest. Ethan then taps for 5 and casts Mirari's Wake. He taps his forest, which now taps for 2, and casts Farseek. He finds the Abzan Triome to the battlefield tapped, and passes to Logan. Logan plays a swamp for turn, and then taps for 4, and then casts Nyx Lotus before passing to Justin and drawing off the Monarch. Justin pays 2 life, and then taps for 3, and casts Birthing Pod. He passes after that. Cameron plays a Reliquary Tower. He then taps for 6 and casts God Pharaoh's Statue. Cameron moves to his end step and everyone loses a life, and Ethan cycles Baron Moore, drawing a card. And when it's his turn, Ethan drops a casual Merciless Eviction, exiling all artifacts. Afterwards, he plays Bajuka Bog and exiles Logan's graveyard, and then passes to Logan. Logan casts a Pitiless Plunderer, and then moves to his end step, drawing a card off the Monarch. Justin casts a Priest of Titania on his turn, and then passes to Cameron. And on Cameron's turn, he just casts a Vicious Conquistador and passes turn. And on Cameron's end step, Ethan cycles Tranquil Thicket, and Logan casts Chaos Warp, targeting Ethan's Mirari's Wake. After Ethan shuffles and Logan cuts, Ethan reveals a Heroic Intervention off the top. We move to Ethan's turn, and he plays a Command Tower for his land for turn. Ethan recasts Ikra Shidiqi for 7 mana, and then passes to Logan. On his turn, Logan taps for 2 and plays Impact Trimmers. He explains to the table that he has all the payoffs, but none of the loops. He then plays Chainer, Dementia Master. Everyone takes 1 to Impact Trimmers, and then he passes to Justin. Justin thinks for a bit on his turn, and then passes to Cameron. Cameron starts by casting Llanowar Elves. He then recasts Belbe for 6 mana, and passes to Ethan. Ethan starts his turn off by casting Sanguine Bond. He then moves to combat, swinging Ikra Shidiqi at Cameron, and Cameron takes it. Ethan then points Sanguine Bonds at Logan for 7 after he gains 7 from Ikra Shidiqi. Logan then gets the turn passed to him. He plays Tainted Peak for turn. He then taps for 4 and casts Cryptghast. He then casts Tenacious Dead. Unfortunately, he did miss 2 impact triggers there, but he does extort Tenacious Dead with Cryptghast. Everyone loses a life and he gains 3. Logan then plays Blood Artist and extorts it, and in response to the extortion, Justin casts Path to Exile, targeting Cryptghast. And in response to the Path to Exile, Ethan flashes in Opposition Agent. Logan then wisely chooses to decline the search trigger. I also forgot to mention that before Cryptghast left the battlefield, Logan decided to tap his Mountain Swamp for a red and a black. Blood Artist finally enters, and unfortunately another impact trigger is missed. With the last 3 of his mana, Logan casts Wheel of Misfortune. In response, Justin swords to Plowshares Ethan's Opposition Agent. Everyone is then given pen and paper. They secretly write down a number and then reveal it to the camera. Ethan and Cameron pick 7, Logan picked 5, and Justin picked 10. Logan, the man casting the card, unfortunately does not get to do anything with this. Ethan, Justin, and Cameron discard their hand and draw 7, and Justin takes 10 damage for picking the highest number. Logan at least gets to draw a card on his end step thanks to the Monarch. After missing several land drops, Justin finally plays a mountain. He then starts his turn off by casting a Root Maze. He then taps Priest of Titania for 3 because Llanowar Elves and Belbe are also elves on the battlefield, and then casts Worldly Tutor. He searches his library and finds Karmic Guide and puts it on the top of it. He then taps for a white and uses the last 2 green from Priest of Titania to cast an Archon of Emeria. He is now finished with his turn and passes to Cameron. Cameron starts off his turn by swinging Vicious Conquistador at Ethan. Once it attacks, everyone loses 1 life. After Ethan takes his damage, Cameron moves to his post-combat main phase, and makes 6 colorless mana off Belbe. He then taps for 2 more mana, and casts Ugin the Spirit Dragon. He neg-5s him, exiling pretty much everything at the board. Cameron then plays a forest, and taps for 8, casting Finale of Devastation, X is 6. He searches his library, and puts Ob Nixilis Unshackled onto the battlefield. Cameron then passes. Ethan starts his turn off with an Arbor Elf, and then sacks it to Village Rites, drawing 2 cards. Ob Nixilis gets a counter. He then casts Skull Clamp, and passes to Logan. On his turn, Logan taps for 7, and casts Dargo. He moves to his end step and draws a card. Justin taps for 2, and casts Arcane Signet. With nothing left to do, he passes to Cameron. Cameron begins by swinging 5 in the air at Logan to get the Monarch from him. He then casts Maelstrom Colossus, cascading into Staff of Nin. He then casts Birds of Paradise, taking 1 to Nurturing Peatland. And then before passing, he bolts Ethan with Ugin. And on Cameron's end step, Ethan taps for 6, losing 1 to Murmuring Bosk, exiles 16 cards from his graveyard, and casts Empty the Pits, X is equal to 9. Ethan makes 9 2/2 zombies, and this is all in response to Cameron's Monarch trigger. Ethan moves straight to combat on his turn. He swings 4 zombies at Ugin and 5 at Cameron. Cameron blocks 2 of them, 1 with birds and 1 with his Colossus. 1 of Ethan's zombies dies and Cameron's Birds of Paradise dies, giving Obnixilis 2 counters. Ugin dies and Cameron takes 6, giving Ethan the Monarchy. Ethan then passes to Logan and draws off the Monarchy. Logan starts his turn off with a Talisman of Indulgence, and then casts Goblin Bombardment. And then he passes to Justin. Justin plays a Bloodstained Mire and passes to Cameron. And on Justin's end step, Cameron makes Ethan lose 1 to Staff of Nin. And then on his turn, he draws an extra card to the staff. He then casts a Siphon Mine, making everyone else discard a card, and he draws 3. He plays a Woodland Cemetery as his land for turn. He then casts Garrup's Uprising, drawing a card to its ETB. Cameron then attempts to pass the turn to Ethan, but Ethan stops him on his end step. Ethan then casts White Sun Zenith, X is equal to 4. He makes 4 2/2 tokens. But that's not all. Ethan then casts Second Harvest, doubling all tokens he has. Ethan untaps with 24 2/2 tokens. To add insult to injury, Ethan then casts Elish Norn, making all of his 2/2s 4/4s. But before Ethan can attack, Cameron casts Beast Within, targeting Elish Norn. After doing a little math and realizing he can still kill Logan and Cameron, he sends 13 zombies at Cameron, 9 of them go to Logan, and 2 at Justin. At this point, I noticed there's a little bit of a life total discrepancy. Logan forgot to gain the 3 life from Cryptcast, even though everyone still lost it. So everyone thinks he's at 15 right now. And before Logan dies, he sacrifices Dargo, pinging Ethan for 1. Cameron also pings Ethan for 1 with Staff of Nin before he dies. Justin fetches on Ethan's end step, finding a land to the battlefield. Draws his last pathetic card, Yugi, and concedes. Hey, you're at the end of the video. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. The deck list will be down in the description. This is the last episode of our Commander Legends series. We had a great time recording it and editing it, but more EDH content will be coming out shortly after. Have a good one.